There is a sacred reason some truths are not openly declared, not because they are secret, but because they cannot be received through explanation alone. Words can point, but they cannot deliver realization. Many who sat near wisdom believed proximity itself would grant understanding. Yet the deepest truth was never meant to be handed over as information. It was meant to be discovered in the quiet place within you where no teacher can enter and no voice can interfere. The hidden truth is this: nothing outside of you completes you, enlightens you, or brings fulfillment. As long as the mind looks outward for confirmation, guidance, or authority, it postpones the moment of awakening. This is why the most important truth is often withheld, because premature knowledge becomes a substitute for experience. When truth is given too early, it becomes an idea to admire rather than a reality to live. Many seekers ask for methods, practices, steps, and formulas, believing that repetition will produce transformation. Yet true awakening does not occur through effort. It happens through surrender. It is not achieved by striving to become something new, but by releasing the belief that you are incomplete. The moment you stop trying to reach truth and allow truth to reveal itself, something shifts silently and permanently. This is why silence was emphasized more than explanation. Silence is not the absence of sound, it is the presence of awareness. In silence, the personal sense of I dissolves, and what remains is a deeper knowing that has always been there. No words can produce this recognition. No teaching can replace it. It arises naturally when the mind stops interfering. The danger of constant instruction is that it can create dependence. When a student relies on a teacher's words instead of inner awareness, growth slows. Wisdom never intended to be a crutch. It was meant to awaken independence. At a certain point, guidance must withdraw so realization can emerge. What feels like withholding is often an act of compassion, allowing the seeker to stand alone in truth. Why do you need to know this now? Because the world is louder than ever, filled with voices offering answers, solutions, and spiritual identities. Yet the truth you seek is not found in accumulation. It is found in release, not in learning more, but in trusting the quiet intelligence already operating within you. When you stop asking, "What should I do?" and begin resting in awareness, life reorganizes itself effortlessly, insight arises without effort, peace appears without cause, direction unfolds without struggle. This is not mystery. It is your natural state once the search ends. What was hidden was never meant to be hidden forever. It waits patiently until the seeker is ready to stop seeking. And when that moment comes, no explanation is needed, because you do not understand it, you recognize it. 1. Truth cannot be transferred intellectually because the mind deals only in symbols, concepts, and second-hand impressions, while truth itself is a living reality. When something is explained, it is immediately filtered through memory, belief, conditioning, and expectation. The listener does not receive truth as it is, they receive an interpretation shaped by what they already know. This is why intellectual understanding often gives the illusion of growth while leaving the inner state unchanged. Person may speak accurately about truth, quote it, defend it, and even teach it, yet still live from fear, effort, and separation. Intellectual knowledge always operates in time. It looks at truth as something to be reached, applied, or achieved later. Realization, however, occurs outside time. It is not built step by step, it is recognized in a single moment of awareness. This recognition does not come from accumulating information, but from the collapse of false assumptions. The intellect adds, but realization subtracts. It removes the belief that truth is distant, external, or earned through effort. When truth is approached mentally, it becomes an object. The mind tries to grasp it, define it, and hold it, but truth cannot be possessed. The moment it is turned into an object of thought, it loses its living quality. This is why explanations can point toward truth but can never deliver it. They function like signposts, not destinations. Confusing the signpost for the destination is one of the most subtle obstacles on the spiritual path. inner realization occurs when attention shifts from thinking about truth to being still enough to notice what is already present. In that stillness, something is recognized rather than learned. It feels familiar, not new. There is no excitement of discovery, only a quiet certainty. This certainty does not depend on logic or argument. It does not need reinforcement. It simply is. This is also why many people resist inner realization even while seeking it. Intellectual learning feels safe because it keeps control in the hands of the mind. Realization requires surrender, and surrender feels like loss to the ego. The ego would rather understand truth than disappear in it. As long as understanding is prioritized over awareness, truth remains conceptual. Realization cannot be forced. It arrives when the mind stops trying to extract something from life and instead becomes receptive. This receptivity is not passive, it is alert, present, and open. In that openness, truth reveals itself without explanation, without drama, without effort, known directly rather than thought about, lived rather than discussed, recognized rather than acquired, too. Silence reveals more than constant teaching or explanation, because truth is not something the mind needs to be filled with, but something it needs to stop obscuring. Continuous instruction keeps the attention outward, listening, comparing, evaluating, and trying to understand. While this can sharpen the intellect, it often dulls awareness. The deeper dimension of understanding does not emerge from more words, but from the absence of them. In silence, the noise of interpretation fades, and what remains is direct perception. When teaching is constant, the listener unconsciously develops dependence. Each explanation becomes something to lean on, a reference point, a reassurance that someone else knows the way. This reliance subtly weakens inner trust. Silence, on the other hand, removes external support and turns attention inward. At first, this can feel uncomfortable, even empty, because the mind is used to being occupied. Yet this discomfort is not a problem, it is a threshold. Beyond it lies a deeper awareness that does not require guidance to function. Silence is not merely the absence of speech. It is the suspension of mental activity that constantly labels, judges, and concludes. When explanations stop, the mind no longer has material to work with, and in that pause, something essential becomes noticeable. Awareness, which was always present, steps into the foreground. This awareness does not explain itself, it does not argue or persuade. It simply knows. Words inevitably divide experience. They separate subject from object, teacher from student, seeker from truth. Silence dissolves these divisions. In silence, there is no one explaining and no one listening, there is only being. This unity cannot be taught because teaching requires separation. It can only be revealed when separation temporarily falls away. Constant teaching also risks turning truth into a system. Systems create structure, but they also create boundaries. Once truth is organized into ideas, methods, and principles, it becomes manageable to the mind but distant from life. Silence returns truth to immediacy. It removes the framework and allows reality to be encountered directly, without mediation. Many fear silence because it offers no distraction from oneself. In silence, unresolved fears, beliefs, and attachments rise to the surface. Teaching can temporarily soothe these by offering answers, but silence allows them to dissolve at the root. This dissolution is not achieved by analysis, but by exposure. When something is fully seen without resistance, it loses its power. The most profound shifts in understanding rarely happen while listening to explanations. They occur in quiet moments when the mind relaxes its grip and awareness naturally expands. Silence does not add anything to you. It removes what is unnecessary. And in that removal, truth stands revealed, not as an idea to be accepted, but as a reality that has always been present, waiting for the noise to end. 3. Spiritual power is activated through consciousness, not techniques, because power does not originate from what you do, but from what you are aware of. Techniques operate at the level of action, repetition, and effort, while consciousness operates at the level of being. A technique assumes that something must be added or performed in order to access power, But consciousness reveals that power is already present and only needs to be recognized. When awareness shifts, power expresses itself naturally without manipulation. Techniques can be helpful at an early stage because they discipline the mind and provide structure, but they cannot produce transformation by themselves. Repetition of a method may create temporary experiences, emotional highs, or moments of calm. Yet these are not the same as lasting inner authority. True spiritual power is not an experience that comes and goes. It is a stable awareness that quietly governs thought, emotion, and action. This stability cannot be manufactured through technique because it is not the result of effort. Consciousness is the source from which all techniques arise. Breathing methods, affirmations, meditations, and rituals only have influence when they are supported by awareness. Without consciousness, they become mechanical. With consciousness, even ordinary actions become powerful. This is why two people can practice the same method with very different results. The difference is not in the technique, but in the level of awareness behind it. When consciousness awakens, effort diminishes. There is less striving to change circumstances and more clarity about their nature. From this clarity, action becomes precise and effective without force. Spiritual power expresses itself as discernment, peace, and inner authority rather than dramatic displays. It is the power to remain centered in the midst of uncertainty, to act without fear, and to respond rather than react. Techniques tend to keep attention focused on the future, on what will happen if the method is done correctly or long enough. Consciousness brings attention into the present. In the present, power is immediate. There is no waiting, no build-up, no dependency on progress. Awareness itself becomes the instrument through which life flows intelligently. Another limitation of techniques is that they can strengthen the sense of a personal doer. The mind begins to believe that it is producing spiritual results, which subtly reinforces ego. Consciousness dissolves this illusion. As awareness deepens, it becomes clear that power was never personal. It was always operating, sustaining breath, thought, intuition, and life itself. Recognition replaces effort and humility replaces control. When consciousness leads, techniques fall away naturally or become secondary. Life itself becomes the practice. Each moment becomes an opportunity for awareness to express itself through clarity, compassion, and wisdom. This is not achieved by perfecting methods, but by resting in awareness and allowing power to move without obstruction. 4. Dependence on teachers delays direct inner awakening because it subtly shifts authority away from inner awareness and places it in an external source. While guidance can be valuable, especially at the beginning of a spiritual journey, it becomes an obstacle when the seeker begins to rely on explanations, approval, or interpretation rather than direct perception. The mind starts to ask what the teacher would say or do instead of listening inwardly, and this habit prevents the emergence of inner clarity. When dependence forms, learning becomes imitation rather than realization. The seeker adopts language, concepts, and attitudes borrowed from the teacher and mistakes them for understanding. This creates a spiritual identity that appears knowledgeable but lacks depth. The inner shift that brings awakening does not occur through imitation. It occurs through direct seeing. As long as truth is filtered through another person's understanding, it remains second-hand. Teachers can point, but they cannot see on behalf of the student. When reliance deepens, the seeker may unconsciously avoid responsibility for their own awareness. Doubt is taken to the teacher instead of being explored inwardly. Confusion is explained away instead of being faced. This postpones awakening because clarity arises only when one is willing to stand alone in not knowing without reassurance or borrowed certainty. Another subtle effect of dependence is fear of deviation. The seeker becomes cautious about trusting their own insight if it does not align perfectly with the teacher's words. This creates inner conflict and self-doubt. True awakening requires the courage to trust direct experience even when it contradicts what has been taught. Without this courage, inner authority never fully develops. There is also a psychological comfort in dependence. Being guided feels safer than being aware. A teacher provides structure, meaning, and direction which can temporarily relieve uncertainty. But awakening does not remove uncertainty, it transforms one's relationship to it. When dependence remains, uncertainty is avoided rather than transcended. The seeker stays in a managed understanding instead of entering living awareness. The deepest teachers eventually withdraw, not out of neglect but out of wisdom. They recognize that continued guidance can hinder growth. When the external voice quiets, the inner voice has space to emerge. This transition can feel like abandonment, but it is actually initiation. It invites the seeker to discover that awareness does not disappear when guidance ends. Direct inner awakening begins when the seeker no longer needs permission to see, understand, or rest in truth. Guidance has fulfilled its purpose at that point. What remains is awareness meeting itself without intermediaries. Dependence dissolves, not through rejection of the teacher, but through gratitude and release. The seeker realizes that the true guide was never outside, but quietly present all along, waiting to be trusted. 5. Truth unfolds only when the seeker is inwardly ready, because realization is not governed by effort or desire, but by receptivity. Readiness is not measured by how much knowledge has been accumulated, how long one has been searching, or how sincerely one wants answers. It is measured by the willingness to release assumptions, identities, and expectations. Until this willingness matures, truth remains hidden in plain sight, not as punishment, but as protection from misunderstanding. Many seekers believe that intensity of desire accelerates awakening. In reality, intense desire often reinforces the sense of lack. The mind seeks truth as something missing, something to be acquired. This orientation keeps attention fixed on the future and away from present awareness. Readiness arises when seeking softens, when the need to get somewhere gives way to a quiet openness. In that openness, truth can reveal itself without resistance. Inner readiness also involves humility. The mind must reach a point where it recognizes the limits of its own understanding. As long as one believes they already know, truth has no space to enter. Readiness is the moment when certainty dissolves and curiosity remains without agenda. This is not confusion. It is a clear acknowledgement of not knowing. From this state, insight emerges naturally. Another aspect of readiness is emotional honesty. Truth cannot unfold while parts of experience are being avoided or suppressed. Fear, doubt, and unresolved attachments cloud perception when they are resisted. When these are allowed to be seen without judgment, they lose their grip. This clearing creates inner space. Truth does not arrive as something new. It appears as what was always present once the clutter is removed. Timing also plays a role. Inner readiness often develops through life itself. Disappointment, loss, success, and failure gradually exhaust the belief that fulfillment can be found externally. When outer solutions no longer satisfy, attention turns inward without force. This turning is not dramatic. It is quiet, almost unnoticed. Yet it marks a significant shift from seeking answers to listening for understanding. Truth cannot be rushed because it is not an object to be grasped. When someone hears truth before they are ready, it becomes an idea, a belief, or a philosophy. Later, when readiness deepens, the same words suddenly carry life. Nothing has changed in the teaching, everything has changed in the listener. This reveals that readiness, not instruction, determines realization. When the seeker becomes inwardly ready, truth unfolds effortlessly. There is no struggle, no excitement, no sense of achievement. There is recognition, accompanied by a calm certainty that needs no validation. Readiness is not something one achieves. It is what remains when striving ends and awareness is allowed to stand alone, receptive and clear. 6. Living awareness matters more than spoken instruction because truth is revealed through direct experience, not through explanation. Words describe, define and interpret, but awareness perceives. Instruction can point toward understanding, but it cannot replace the moment-to-moment recognition of what is happening within and around you. Without living awareness, Even the most accurate instruction remains theoretical, stored in memory rather than embodied in life. Spoken instruction operates in the realm of thought. It appeals to the intellect and organizes understanding into concepts. Awareness operates prior to thought. It notices thinking itself, emotions as they arise, and the subtle movements of attention. This noticing is transformative because it does not interfere. It allows experience to unfold naturally, revealing patterns that words can never fully capture. When awareness is alive, insight arises spontaneously without being taught. There is also a limit to how much instruction the mind can integrate. Too much teaching can create mental clutter where ideas overlap and compete. This clutter dulls sensitivity. Living awareness simplifies. It cuts through complexity by bringing attention back to what is actually present. In this presence, confusion dissolves without analysis. Clarity is not reached by resolving every question, but by seeing that many questions lose relevance when awareness deepens. Instruction often creates expectations. The listener begins to measure experience against what has been heard. If something does not match the description, doubt arises. This comparison pulls attention away from direct experience and into judgment. Living awareness has no such comparison. It meets each moment freshly. This freshness is essential for truth because truth is alive, not static. It cannot be reduced to a formula and then applied universally. Another limitation of spoken instruction is that it can become a substitute for transformation. Listening feels productive. Understanding feels like progress. Yet life remains unchanged. Awareness, by contrast, immediately affects how one relates to thoughts, emotions, and circumstances. Reactivity softens, space appears between stimulus and response. This shift is subtle but profound. It changes how life is lived, not just how it is understood. Living awareness also dissolves the division between spiritual practice and daily life. Instruction is often confined to specific times and settings. Awareness is continuous. It is present while speaking, listening, working, and resting. In this continuity, truth is no longer something sought during special moments. It becomes the background of ordinary life. Wisdom expresses itself through simple clarity, patience, and responsiveness. Ultimately, spoken instruction must give way to silent seeing, not because words are wrong, but because they have fulfilled their purpose. When awareness is alive, it no longer needs explanation. It recognizes truth directly and responds naturally. What remains is not a collection of teachings, but a way of being that quietly embodies understanding in each moment as it unfolds. The heart of this message is simple yet demanding. Truth is not something to be learned, collected, or received from another, but something to be realized through living awareness. Words, teachers, methods, and explanations serve only as temporary guides. They point, prepare, and sometimes protect, but they are never the destination. When relied upon too long, they quietly delay the very awakening they were meant to support. What was once withheld was not a secret meant to exclude, but a truth that cannot survive premature exposure. Until the seeker is inwardly ready, truth becomes an idea instead of a reality. Silence, surrender, and inner readiness create the space where realization unfolds naturally. In that space, dependence dissolves, effort relaxes, and consciousness reveals its own power without technique or struggle. The moment this is understood, the search changes. Seeking turns into listening. Learning gives way to recognition. Authority shifts from external voices to quiet inner knowing. Life itself becomes the teacher, and awareness becomes the practice. Nothing new is added, yet everything is transformed. What remains is a steady clarity that does not need explanation, guidance, or validation, only presence to be lived.